changes. Reconciliation is still possible with them. According to family members, the door is still open. There is a view that time, age, and distance could soften the edges such that Brooklyn will ultimately seek connection again, even if communication has slowed to a crawl. However, this is the truth that makes things more difficult. Compromise would be necessary for reconciliation. Furthermore, neither side appears prepared for compromise. Brooklyn would require recognition that his marriage is deserving of unwavering respect, that boundaries were breached, and that his feelings are legitimate. The Beckhams, on the other hand, would require guarantees that family harmony would not be used as a weapon against them in public, that complaints would not be broadcast online, and that personal affairs could once again be kept private. Nicola would also need to convince herself that taking a step back won't bring back the old dynamics. Considering how widely known this conflict has grown, that is a difficult order. Every action Brooklyn does is now closely examined. Every time someone misses a Beckham event, it is noted. Every encouraging remark made by the Peltz side, music, is examined. The act of remaining silent now makes a statement. Even Brooklyn's history is being re-examined. Moments that formerly appeared privileged now appear tricky, from his early football years under constant surveillance to former mentors recounting a boyhood defined by worry and pressure. Additionally, there are differences in public opinion. For some, Brooklyn represents the ultimate liberation from a stifling legacy. He is perceived by some as abandoning his parents, who provided him with everything. Nicola is perceived by some as being extremely protective. Some perceive her as unyielding. However, those assessments frequently lack subtlety. This is not a tale of heroes versus villains. There is a clash of values. The Beckham community values perseverance, self-control, and putting up with discomfort. For the greater good, the Peltz world values decisive action, immediate limits, and emotional loyalty. Brooklyn made that decision, and decisions like that almost always have repercussions. Everyone wants to know what happens next. Will Brooklyn get softer over time? Will Nicola ever feel comfortable going back into that familial dynamic? Will Victoria and David eventually choose to remain silent or speak in public? Or is this one of those famous injuries that never truly heals? Families seldom remain broken forever, according to history, but they do alter over time. Reconciliation is unlikely to resemble the past. There won't be coordinated appearances or identical Instagram posts. It will be more cautious, quieter, and farther away. If it doesn't, Brooklyn Beckham's story takes a completely different turn. A break from a dynasty, not its continuation. A young guy prioritizing privacy over brand, marriage over legacy, and identity above inheritance. It remains to be seen if that decision results in tranquility or loneliness. However, one thing is for sure: one disagreement, one wedding moment, or one post isn't the focus of this feud. It has to do with control, power, and the price of emerging from a generational shadow. And for Brooklyn Beckham, dealing with the consequences of her decision may be more difficult than picking a side. Once marketed to the public as a contemporary fairy tale, a well-known football dynasty meets American billionaires, it has now escalated into one of the most intimate and intensely personal celebrity family conflicts in recent memory. Brooklyn Beckham and Nicola Peltz, a couple who seem to be united on the outside, but are surrounded by two influential families embroiled in a quiet but now highly visible dispute, are at the center of it all. Because this goes beyond a single Instagram post or a wedding moment. This is about money, legacy, control, identity, and what occurs when two powerful families in the world clash over a young guy who is attempting to identify himself. Additionally, it gets more complex the deeper you delve. Growing up, Brooklyn Beckham was the eldest son of David and Victoria Beckham, one of the world's most famous celebrity couples. His life began in front of cameras, headlines, sponsorships, and expectations as soon as he was born. Brooklyn did not enjoy the luxury of anonymity, in contrast to many offspring of celebrities. He was attending elite football schools, living under continual public scrutiny, and moving with permanent protection by the time he was in his early teens. His early upbringing was described by insiders as being rigid and controlled behind the scenes, yet appearing beautiful on the outside. He continued to feel that strain as an adult. Brooklyn experimented with football, fashion, photography, and cookery. Every reinvention was met with intense public scrutiny and subtle comparisons to the Beckham brand, which is based on worldwide commercial appeal, discipline, and image control. Nicola Peltz comes in. Nicola was not a famous person. She was a powerful woman. One of the most powerful billionaire investors in America is her father, Nelson Peltz. Unlike the Beckhams, her family does not depend on public perception. Their riches is structural, unobtrusive, and does not require public permission. And that distinction is important. It was more than simply a wedding when Brooklyn and Nicola tied the knot in 2022 at her family's mansion in Palm Beach. It represented the metaphorical union of two entirely distinct universes. It appeared ostentatious from the outside, perfect and full of stars. However, the emotional fault line that has recently been exposed was created behind the scenes at that music wedding. Since then, Brooklyn has asserted that he and his parents were at odds long before the wedding. He said that Nicola was never really accepted. According to him, remarks were made that questioned if she was really family, and that the Beckham brand took precedence over individual limits. The wedding celebration itself was the most dramatic occasion, and the one that altered everything. Brooklyn claims that a dance between him and his mother, Victoria Beckham, unexpectedly took the place of his first dance with Nicola. In front of hundreds of people, he reported feeling embarrassed, uneasy, and taken aback. What came next was much more revealing. According to reports, Nicola sobbed as she left the room. Her family members trailed behind. The entire event's emotional. Tone changed when Brooklyn was left dumbfounded on stage. This was more than simply embarrassing for Nicola. It was emblematic. She saw that moment as a larger struggle for respect, boundaries, and emotional primacy. It also signaled the point at which she took a firm stance, according to those acquainted with the matter. Brooklyn started to distance himself from his family in the months that followed. His attendance at Beckham activities decreased. His public stance turned more and more in favor of Peltz, and there was apparently a near-complete breakdown in communication behind the scenes. Then came the unexpected music moment. Brooklyn made her public debut. He accused his parents of manipulating narratives, putting image before reality, and meddling in his marriage in a long personal statement. He claimed to have been silenced for years, and that he had never really stood up for himself until he spoke up. He was pretty clear about one thing: he was choose his spouse. Many onlookers were astounded not only by what he stated, but also by how definitive it sounded. He claimed that the Beckham family's presentation as flawless was a fiction, that he had no desire to make amends, and that he had felt deceived for the most of his childhood. David and Victoria were reportedly devastated behind the scenes. Those who were close to them described two parents who were both terrified of losing their kid forever and astonished by the public nature of their son's claims. They are supposed to think that despite everything, reconciliation is still achievable, just not without healing, time, and space. However, this is the point at which it is hard to ignore the power dynamics: music. The Beckham family's reputation, self-control, and constant public scrutiny all contributed to their legacy. Every action was managed, labeled, and monetized. In contrast, the Peltz family works in boardrooms rather than in the news. Their loyalty system is extremely private and guarded, and their power doesn't require public approval. This change might be freeing for Brooklyn. He is the spouse of the Peltzers, not the brand. He is not supposed to portray a worldwide image. He doesn't have to perform family togetherness for the cameras or be judged against a football star. However, there is a price for that freedom. There are rumors that there are expectations, albeit varied ones, even within the Peltz circle. Success is still evaluated. There are still doubts about independence, music. Furthermore, Brooklyn's continuous difficulty defining a secure job path continues to be a silent source of conflict. His younger siblings, meanwhile, seem to be adopting a different strategy. Cruz Beckham's parents and brothers have publicly supported him as he concentrates on his musical career. Romeo is still pursuing his career and modeling goals. The remainder of the Beckham family has mostly kept quiet, opting for moderation over going public. And that difference says a lot. There are no leaked phone conversations or violent yelling altercations in this conflict. It is quieter, colder, and possibly more painful. It has to do with emotional loyalty. It concerns a wife who feels that boundaries were crossed too frequently, parents who feel taken by surprise, and a son who feels ignored. And the unanswered question is right underneath it all. Did Brooklyn merely exchange one strong orbit for another, or did he at last achieve independence? Because one truth cannot be avoided as long as this impasse persists. Love does not vanish when two powerful families clash. However, pride, control, and legacy frequently take precedence. And Brooklyn Beckham's next action might reveal which family, if any, he actually belongs to. The contrast, rather than merely the emotion, is what makes this feud so captivating. The Beckhams, a family whose ascent was entirely visible to the public, are on one side. Discipline, selflessness, and unwavering expectations shaped David Beckham's career. Through sheer control over her image and brand, Victoria Beckham transformed herself several times, going from pop superstar to a fashion empire. In such world, unity is both strategic and emotional. Family appearances are important. Silence is important. Optics are important. The Peltz family is on the other side, rich enough that they don't require the approval of the public. Influence, not popularity, is the source of Nelson Peltz's power. Boardrooms, not stadiums. Contracts, not cameras. They have a more subdued, tighter, and less theatrical sort of familial loyalty. Brooklyn Beckham is situated in the middle of these two systems. Brooklyn battled for years to develop a sense of self that was entirely his own. Every attempt at cooking, clothes, or photography was instantly sifted by one question: does this merit the Beckham moniker? Ambition is not the only thing that is shaped by such pressure. It stifles experimentation. Brooklyn discovered something new with Nicola. She didn't have to prove herself in front of others as a child. She didn't require praise or affirmation. Importantly, she was not raised in a household that prioritized image control over feeling. Moments, boundaries, and loyalty, especially in marriage, are all important to Nicola. Because of this, the wedding situation went beyond a simple misunderstanding. It wasn't about dancing for Nicola. The question of whether her marriage would ever genuinely come first was symbolic. And that insight altered her perspective of her future in the Beckham family, according to those with direct knowledge of the matter. Brooklyn's alignment changed significantly after that. He ceased to act as a mediator. He ceased to soften his words. Furthermore, he didn't hedge when he did speak in public. There was no room for interpretation in his words. He didn't extend a helping hand. He sketched a line. Many onlookers were taken aback by how steadfast he seemed afterward. According to people close to Brooklyn, he has no regrets. That he feels lighter now that he has spoken his belief that remaining silent would have meant completely losing himself. This, in his opinion, was not revolt. It was self-defense. However, the narrative appears rather different from Beckham's perspective. It is said that David and Victoria are seriously injured, not only by the charges, but also by how definitive they are. Even though they are aware of the suffering involved, parents who have dedicated their lives to shielding their kids from damage in public feel betrayed when their oldest son expresses his complaints in such a prominent manner. According to reports, they worry that Brooklyn is withdrawing himself, that bridges are being destroyed too soon, and that the harm might be irreversible in the long run. But in spite of everything, one thing never changed.